Hi, everybody. Welcome to our Lunch and Learn. My name is Angie Marcus, and I am the Water Efficiency Program Supervisor with Cobb County Water System. And I just want to welcome you all to our Lunch and Learn focusing on winterizing your irrigation system. We've got a couple of folks who are still logging in, so we're going to go over some housekeeping stuff before we get into the meat of the presentation. But if you can hear me, if you could give me a thumbs up so that I know that you can hear me and that my mic's working and everything. Perfect. That is excellent. And we also have a chat box that we're going to be wanting you to use because we're going to have you muted during the presentation. So if you think of any kind of questions during the presentation that you want answered, we'll get to those towards the end of the presentation. But we don't want you to forget the questions, and you can't ask the questions verbally. So if you're going to just type those questions into the chat box, and to find your chat box, you're going to, usually it's at the bottom of the screen, or sometimes it's hidden underneath those three dots down at the bottom of the screen, and it will be the button that says chat. So you're just going to click on that chat button, and on the right-hand side, it should pop up, and you'll be able to type in questions in that chat box. You'll want to, if you're not actually using the chat box, you'll want to X out of it. At the top right, you'll see the X, and that'll close the chat box because it will actually cover up some of the screen and cover up some of the presentation. So in order to see the whole presentation, you'll want to close the chat box out whenever you get finished with it. So behind the scenes, we actually have one of our great techers here, Shondon Moore, and Shondon's behind there, and he's actually monitoring the chat box and any questions that pop up that you may have, or if you're having issues with anything, you can type those into that chat box as well, and he'll help you out as best he can. He should have typed something in the chat box right now so you know he's there, and he's doing all of the camera switching and everything like that. So he's behind the scenes helping us out. Don't forget to type your questions in the chat box since you're all going to be muted. So to see this presentation, so to be able to see it as best you can, usually it's in the top right of your screen will be a view or speaker view. Sometimes you'll have it on grid view, usually is the default, which it looks like the Brady Bunch, how it's a whole bunch of different squares and you can see everybody's face. You'll want to go ahead and change your view to active speaker or theater view. That way you can usually still see small boxes of the participants, but that way you'll be able to see our slides and our presentation and see the person who's actually speaking, because we've got a couple of different speakers that we're going to be switching through, and we just want to make sure that you can see those as well as you can and that that's your main focus on your screen. So you can just see the active speaker and you just click on that and it should make whoever the active speaker is a bigger screen. If you can't and you still have the grid view, then you can click on the person sometimes and that will help you out. If you're on a tablet or your phone, some of these things might be the chat box and the speaker view. They're in different places depending on exactly what device you have, so you might just have to look around for those a little bit. So I know we've had a couple of people join us since we started, so I want to welcome you again to the Cobb County Water Systems Lunch and Learn on winterizing your irrigation system. And we have got some great presenters today. We've got two other great presenters today that are going to be talking about what you need to do to winterize your irrigation system and some other irrigation topics. So every month we do a lunch and learn with a different topic. Our topic next month will be on stormwater management, and you can find all of our topics on our website, cobbstreams.org. So today, though, as we focus on winterizing our irrigation system, I am going to turn it over to Hallie Harriman, who is the ag agent here in Cobb County. So we're going to switch over to Hallie. And
All right. So can everybody hear me okay? Perfect. I know. I love the thumbs up. All right. So what I'm going to do very quickly is I'm going to screen share with you guys. Before we get started with Greg's presentation, I just very briefly want to share with you all what Extension is, who we are, what we do, and how we try to help the communities around us. If I can get this playing right. As Angie said, my name is Hallie Harriman. I am your local ag agent and your natural resources extension agent. So we're located over on South Cobb Drive. And like I said, just very briefly, I want to go over what extension is and what we do. So for over 100 years, Extension has been able to provide free, reliable, research-based information. That was our mission then, and that is our mission now. We take information that we get from research, from science, from all types of different arenas that is reliable, and we try to share it in a way, in a language that anyone can understand. I know this past year, we've had a lot of science and research coming at us from all different angles. And one of our goals is to help share that information in a way that everyone can understand and everyone can relate to. So we do this in 3 areas. Our most popular one, maybe here in Cobb, is going to be our youth development area, and that's 4-H. Some of you guys might be 4-Hers yourselves or know 4-Hers. It's something that we have integrated in the Georgia public school system, which is awesome. Our second area is family and consumer sciences. And then finally, our third area is my area, and that is ag and natural resources. So really briefly, I want to share with you just some of the services that we offer. What you see on this screen is not exhaustive. We do way more than what's on this list here. And I encourage you, if you're interested in learning more, just Google us and you can check out our website and see everything that we offer. But I thought on this slide, I would just share with you guys what Cobb County does a lot of. We do a lot of soil and water tests. We process many of those each week. We do plant pathology. We also do identification services. So basically what that means, if you have a plant that you don't know, an insect you don't know, you can bring it into us and we will try and identify that specimen for you. We also try to identify plant diseases and disorders, and this ranges from turf grass to ornamental horticulture to tree disorders and diseases. So we really try to help you understand what's going on and how you can help manage it once we have a diagnosis. Next on here, we have our Master Gardener Extension Program. This is an awesome program. We actually have some MGs online with us here today, so welcome. Cobb has a great program. It's one of the largest ones in the state, and they work on a lot of different projects that help benefit our community. And then finally, educational presentations and programs. Like I said, we are all about sharing information. And so a lot of what we do is presentations like today. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce Greg, who is our main speaker. Greg is actually the training coordinator for the Center for Urban Agriculture, and he's going to be the main guy today in answering all of your questions about winterizing your irrigation. So I'm going to go ahead and close my PowerPoint presentation, and I will stop sharing my screen and we can get this presentation started with Greg. I can figure out how to stop share.
Thank you, Hallie.
Sure.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to share.
Here we go.
I hope you take advantage of those excellent resources that Hallie offers, and you have an excellent office in Cobb County. And this is an exciting way to end the year on a winterization topic. In fact, we woke up this morning with frost, so it's just perfect. So I'm going to share my screen here. So I want to welcome you this afternoon. We're going to talk shortly about winterizing your irrigation system. Now, I'm assuming that most of you have an irrigation system if you've joined in today. Let's see here. Okay, had to figure out where my advancing my slide is, so I'm clicking my screen. Okay, so we're going to talk about why we winterize our systems. I think it's pretty obvious why we would do that. We're also going to talk about knowing your irrigation system, because to winterize your system, you really need to have an understanding of what is underground and what's happening, what you're trying to protect, what you're trying to avoid. as far as damage goes, what are the components that you're working with, and what is your layout. And every system is different. So I'm going to give you some general principles today, and we're going to first talk about that layout, and then we're going to go kind of walk you through winterizing and a couple of methods and some of the some safety tips here. So, why winterize? Of course, you're trying to protect your irrigation investment, but you're also protecting plants. So think about if you have a damaged irrigation system or a malfunctioning irrigation system due to winter damage. We get a lot of calls early to midsummer when things heat up and plants start looking stressed, and you need your irrigation. And so you may lose plants if your irrigation system is out of commission from winter damage. So this is a good time to be proactive here. The other thing is, of course, conserving water. Oftentimes what happens is you have an irrigation system that is on an automatic timer. So you wake up in the morning, you go to work, and your irrigation system is running, or maybe you're still asleep because some irrigation systems may be set for 5 o'clock in the morning or 4 o'clock in the morning, which is a good time to water, by the way, is early morning. Those plants have that water right away as the day gets going. So, what happens is you have a broken head in the system and you're not aware of it. You may see some of the signs of erosion or water running down the street. So a lot of water is wasted on broken pipes, broken sprinklers, running too long, that type of thing. So we're going to talk about those things today. Obviously, this type of thing can happen when you have a hard freeze. Broken heads are very common. Those can also be damaged mechanically, by edgers and mowers and things like that, or being run over. It sometimes crack the housing, but oftentimes it's due to freezing. And sprinkler heads are one of the more vulnerable places in your system. Other benefits of winterizing would just be it's a chance to do routine maintenance, inspection, repairs, and troubleshoot the system during a time when you don't really need the irrigation. And so don't wait until the heat wave to start troubleshooting and repairing. So let's talk about typical irrigation systems. Chances are your residential irrigation system is going to have probably 2 types, possibly 3. So the first type is called overhead irrigation, and that would be this top photo here. These are sprinklers. Oftentimes they pop up, but they could also be on fixed risers, maybe in a shrub bed or something like that. So this is called overhead irrigation because it waters over the surface of the ground. This is very common for turf areas. In fact, it's the best solution for turf areas. You really don't have any drip options for turf unless you go subsurface, and that's a whole nother topic, but they tend to get clogged and it's just unreliable. But as far as overhead irrigation, you've got rotors, impact sprayers, and fixed spray type nozzles. Now, drip irrigation is great for bed areas, vegetable gardens. It delivers the water right where it needs to be. They're very efficient, and they use small emitters like this in the center photo. Also, you may have a pre-punched drip hose or even a soaker hose on a drip system. So those are typically found in flower beds and maybe shrub beds as well. But you can pinpoint the irrigation, and there are some pros and cons to each one of these. Drip irrigation, while it's very efficient, also can be a target for critters to chew on, and so you have to do some maintenance on those throughout the year. And then the last one is micro irrigation. These are used a lot in greenhouses. But you may have something like this in a small area. One of the advantages of micro irrigation is just the small emitters and the small coverage area. So if you have a tight space and you need some type of overhead irrigation, those micro emitters work pretty well. We won't get into the pros and cons. I think we're going to be running a little bit short on time. Because I really want to spend the time on winterizing and not on the different types. But just briefly, the overhead covers is great for large areas, good for turf areas. Some of the cons, you can get drift, evaporation, and runoff. And you're also watering foliage, which is a bad idea if you're trying to reduce disease. You want to water the roots, not the foliage. As far as drip, I mentioned, critters like to chew those things. If you're walking through the bed, you may step on the emitters and break them off, or things get clogged easily. But they are very efficient and deliver water where it needs to be. So that's an advantage. So just kind of a quick overview. You may have impact sprinklers. These are the, the old-fashioned, little noisy, and I guess that opened up the door for rotors, which are more popular now. Rotors are typically a single stream like this. They can cover large areas, maybe a radius of 25 to 30 feet. This is a multi-stream rotor, and these are typically used in smaller areas, 12 to 15 feet. This is a fixed spray, also used in those smaller 12 to 15 foot areas, but you don't have any moving parts like the multi-stream. You have a revolving mechanism in this nozzle, whereas a fixed spray shoots one pattern and it doesn't, there's no moving parts other than the pop-up. And then I mentioned those micro sprays. These are used a lot in greenhouses, not so much in landscape applications, but you do occasionally see these in narrow beds. They do require low pressure, so don't put 50 psi through a micro spray, or that thing is going launched into the sky. Drip irrigation, same thing. You're going to need low pressure. You should, if you have this in your system, you probably have a pressure reducer, either built in or added into the line. And if you're having trouble with those, you can add those components. As far as piping goes, generally an irrigation system is going to have either PVC, which is polyvinyl chloride, and those are scheduled either pressure rated by schedule, which is a kind of a traditional method of which matches the dimensions of steel pipe, or you may have pressure rated pipe, such as class 160 or class 200. So, for example, a schedule 40 pipe would be 3/4 inch would be rated at 450 psi, whereas a pressure rated 3/4 inch PVC might be 160 psi or 200 psi. So the wall is much thinner in those. The class 200s usually, when it's used, is used on the lateral lines, so not the main line. You might do a schedule 40 main line and have a pressure rated pipe on your laterals. And then the last would be like a polyethylene pipe. This is the black plastic, very thin walled, typically what you're going to see on a drip line. So something else you'll have in your system, if it's automated, is an electric valve. It just has 2 wire leads that go to this solenoid, and that solenoid is operated by your control box that's on the wall, probably in the garage or somewhere accessible. You may or may not have a pressure regulator in the line. This is a great idea. Sometimes, especially if you're at the bottom of a hill, as far as topography goes, you get a pressure increase with elevation change. So if you're at the bottom of the hill, you're going to have higher pressure than you will if you live at the top of the street. So having a pressure regulator on your system is great. Most of your irrigation systems are rated for the overheads are 35 to 50 psi. But your system may have 100 psi, and if you're at the bottom of the hill, you might even exceed that and have 110 or 120 on occasion. So a pressure regulator is a really good way to protect your system from just everyday use and damage caused from too much pressure. Every system should have a backflow device. There are different types. This is a dual check valve. You may see this in tandem with your meter. And another thing you'll see in your system at different locations will be manual valves, and it might be a gate valve like this type, or it may be a globe valve, and those can be sometimes brass, sometimes plastic. So these are just components you need to be familiar with. So let's talk about the arrangement of a system. So the point of connection or the water source for most people would be a municipal or public water supply. Sometimes you have a private well or even a pond or a lake or something that's a body of water that you're drawing from. You can have rainwater harvesting that's tied to an irrigation system with a pump, and in some cases even a gray water system. So let's just look at a public water supply, a typical arrangement. So you would have a meter that's connected to a public water main. And Hallie, give me a thumbs up if you can see my cursor. Are you able to see that, or am I just looking at my cursor up here by the water main? Okay, so let me see if I can. I'm going to try something here. All right, can you see that? What I circled? Okay, good. All right. So you would have a public water main, and from that, you're going to have a tap line and a shut off. So if you don't pay your water bill, this is where you're going to get cut off. You have a water meter and a backflow device right here. All right, so what this backflow device does is it prevents water from going backwards into the public water main. And now how would that happen? Well, if the pressure dropped all of a sudden in the public water main, it could cause backflow. Another possibility is if you had some kind of a pump system, let's say, well, we'll go further down the line. So this line right here would probably go supply the residents, and you're going to tee off of that, and you'll have another shut-off valve here and another backflow device. And the reason for this is, let's just say you had an external, like a rain harvest system that tied in here, and it was pressurizing that line. If you did not have that backflow device, you could send rainwater harvest into your house or into the public water supply. So very important to have that backflow device. And I'll talk about this later, but anything in blue here should not be touched by you or even your irrigation contractor. These are components that need to be handled by a licensed plumber or the city or the municipal supplier. So typically these components are going to have to be installed by somebody licensed. Now, beyond that, your irrigation system here, sorry, I'm running this with a mouse, so that's really a sloppy looking arrow, but irrigation systems here, that can be handled by you or your landscape professional, depending on your comfort zone. Okay, so what you may have, and I'm not certain on the requirements in Cobb, but in many places you'll have a separate meter for your residential supply and a second meter for your irrigation, especially if you're on public sewer, because the water rates have a built-in rate for sewer often. Well, you don't want to pay sewer tax on your irrigation water. So if you don't have a second meter for irrigation and you're paying sewer tax on your irrigation water, you're probably throwing a lot of money out the window. So make sure you check on this if you're on public sewer, and maybe you can have this installed as a separate meter if you don't have that already. So what does that look like in the real world? Something like this. Over here, this is a major water main. This was taken at the college across the street. So you have a water main that is tied to a meter. So that's that tap line. And this is where the water is metered and where the water can be shut off. Now, from that, there's a tap that goes to an irrigation shut-off valve. And then that goes into this box, which is a backflow device. And underneath that box, we have what's called an RPZ, or reverse pressure zone backflow preventer. And so I believe, let's see, in this case, the water is actually flowing this direction. So in the case of a sudden back pressure, it's going to exit out this port right here. So this prevents backflow by, bypassing here and just wasting the pressure here. Something to note, we'll talk about this maybe later, but you see these pipes are insulated as well as under a cover. We're fortunate in Georgia that we don't have really deep freezing. I mean, if you were in the Midwest, you might be talking about ground freezing that's, 2 feet or more in depth, whereas Georgia, rarely do we get a hard freeze that gets more than 5 inches into the ground. So again, you got to have that backflow device. You may also have one that looks like this. And this works similar. So this is your backflow device. And you see, this is important. This arrow shows you the direction. So this is the downstream shut off, and this is the upstream shut off. and then you have a couple of access ports here. So we're going to talk about winterizing in a little bit using the blowout method, where you actually connect air. So that's going to be done on this downside, the lower or downstream port here. But you got to be sure that's shut off, because you don't want to back pressure your device with air. You may see something like this in the field. This would be located outside your residence. So probably in this case, the water main goes into your house and then comes back out to feed your irrigation system. All right, so this is an overview, kind of a plan view of an irrigation system. You've got your water meter here. You've got a valve that shuts off your irrigation system, and then you've got a main line that goes into your residence. So in this case, this is all outside. In a lot of cases, though, you may have this main water line goes into your residence, and then another line comes back out to the irrigation system through this backflow device. If you were looking at an irrigation system above ground without being buried, it would look something like this. You've got lateral pipes that connect to these sprinklers, and then here where this gentleman's standing, he's operating an electric valve manually, and then behind that we have backflow device and a shut off. So we're going to look at that a little bit closer. This is just a close-up view. So you'd have a sprinkler with piping. These are called laterals that tie to an electric valve. You may have a pressure regulator in that line, and then probably some kind of an emergency shut-off. This is your backflow device here. Oops. All right, so just to kind of show you on this diagram, shut-off valves, you have one here at the meter, and then you have one here at the irrigation system. Backflow preventers, we have two, one here at the meter, and also one here on the irrigation system. So this one prevents anything from the house from backing into the public line. This one keeps anything from the landscape from backing in. Another case might be if there was a fire down the road and they attach to a fire hydrant and the pressure drops, all of a sudden you could get a backflow that way too. So as I mentioned before, it's a good idea to have a pressure regulator on your system that may be located here after the backflow device. And again, this area, these brown pipes here, that should be handled by a licensed plumber up to that point. Now, everything downstream from there, you could work on, or your irrigation contractor. So this will be an irrigation master valve. Now, this is something you may or may not have. The master valve turns on at the same time as your irrigation zones here turn on. So when this timer says operate zone 1, it's going to simultaneously open up the master valve. This is great for golf courses and really large landscapes, because if you had a system failure, or a leak rather, this is all main line, which is going to be pressurized all the time up to the valve. If this main line developed a leak, this master valve, by shutting off every time it cycles on and off, protects you from water flowing all the time. So it's kind of a safety. But you don't have to have that, and most of you probably don't have that master valve. So as far as piping goes, again, the brown pipes represent sort of your main water source coming in to the backflow preventer and possibly a pressure regulator here. But this blue pipe here represents your main line that's pressurized all the time in your irrigation system, at least during the growing season. So you definitely don't want to have a leak on this pipe here, because you're losing water constantly all the time. This is always pressurized. And this line, if you don't drain it in the wintertime, if it's got a vulnerable place along the line and it freezes, there's nowhere for that water to expand because it's already under pressure. So that could cause a crack. So this is one of the parts of your system that we want to try to get the water out of. All right, another component of the irrigation system is you have your clock, and that's tied to this purple highlighted area to each of these electric valves. And these operate the different zones. and you may have a master valve there too. So that's just, think of that as wiring that's tied here. We don't have time to get into troubleshooting, but oftentimes what happens is your valves aren't operating. It could be a connection issue, either at the timer or at the valve, or it could be one of these lines got cut. So that could be a whole nother presentation. All right, sprinklers and emitters. We've got different types. So we talked about overhead sprinklers. In this case, this is one of those single stream rotors. So this might be zone 1. And over here we have zone 2. These might be multi-stream rotors. And then zone 3 might be drip emitters. All right. So we talked about piping again. You're going to probably have a Schedule 40 PVC main line that's pressurized all the time, highlighted in blue. Or you may have a schedule rated pipe or Schedule 40. I mean, a pressure rated pipe or a Schedule 40 on the laterals. All right, so let's have a little quiz here. How many circuits pictured in this diagram? And a circuit is the same thing as a zone, so those are kind of used interchangeably. So how many zones do we have in this diagram? And I'm going to see. Oops. I was trying to look at the chat box, which I can't. All I can see is my PowerPoint on the screen. So, do we have any questions? I mean, any answers on that one? Who can see the chat box that can tell me?
No guesses yet, but I'm going to say 6.
All right. Any other guesses? All right. Well, we have 3 shown here. So we have this zone here with the orange pipes. This would be maybe a lawn area or something. Zone 2 has the yellow pipes, and these are those multi-stream rotors. And zone 3 would be the strip zone. Now, we may have more zones on this. So the other 3 that Hallie's talking about, if you follow this pipe around the corner, those go to the other part of the yard. So I'm going to give you credit right here, Hallie, because you spotted out that there are possibly other zones. So I don't know how many are over there. So we're going to say 3 over there. And then we've got 1 here. All right. Whoops. Look at there. I even had an error on my PowerPoint. That should say 3. So we have represented single stream rotors, multi-stream rotors, and drip. All right. How many valve boxes are in this diagram? This one's a little more tricky. Again, I can't see the chat box. I just see my PowerPoint. So if anybody wants to take a guess, or I'll just give you the answer. I don't get it.
I'm going to go with 5 on this one.
Is it 4?
All right, we got a 4, we've got a 5. So first, we're going to count these big rectangular boxes. They're control valve boxes, and you'll have one on the you'll have one valve box at the meter, one here at this set of 2 electric valves, and then a third one here. But is that all the valve boxes? We also have these others. So total, we have 7. We've got 3 rectangular boxes, and we've got 2, 3, 4. What? 5. We've got. Look, I can't count today, so this should be an 8. That's what you get when you're distracted while you're doing your PowerPoint. So some of those boxes are going to look circular like this, and some of them will be rectangular. So look for these in the yard. Pop these open. Summertime, you really want to make sure you have a glove on, because these are favorite hiding spots for critters and black widows, and I've seen snakes in these things. So just make sure you don't stick your finger in there without a glove on. All right. Okay. All right. So let's talk about winterizing. Before you get started, I would recommend, while you still have the water turned on, your irrigation system should be operational if you haven't winterized already. go outside and turn on each zone and then go look and see where those nozzles are. And maybe even get some of those flags. You can buy an inexpensive bundle of marking flags and go ahead and mark those heads. So you may have to like turn it on, see where the nozzles are, go out there and mark as many as you can find, and then turn it back on and check. And it would be a great idea to even map out your irrigation system. So each of these colors represents a different zone or circuit. If you have a plan, you may have an irrigation plan that was done professionally. It might look something like this, although it would be, customized for your yard. That would be helpful, but you might check it because oftentimes the design and what's actually put in the field are a little bit different. So it'd be good to kind of ground check it, and that's called an as-built drawing when you have something that's drawn after the fact of being installed. So winterizing methods. I'm going to give you two methods real quick, and I think the first method will be very practical for anybody. Regardless of your skill level, you can do method one. The second method is the blowout method, and there's we'll talk some about that, but it's a little more to that one. So method one is gravity flow. So again, before you start, map it out, and let's take a look at our diagram. So step one in this method, and the gravity flow method is basically you're going to turn off the system and you're going to open everything up so that it all drains out. So first thing you need to do is shut off that irrigation system, and you need to find that master shut off for the irrigation system. And it may be here, and it may be further away, but in this diagram, it's right here. The next thing you need to do is go out in the field and either open up, you may have manual drains, and those drains would be located here at the end of the line. Now, I'm guessing most of you do not have manual drains at the end of every zone. It's possible. The other option is you can go to the lowest head in each zone. You have to go to the lowest head, and you're going to unscrew the cap on that sprinkler. And what that will do is allow any water in that line to flow out. So we've shut off the water, we've opened up the manual drains or uncapped the lowest heads. Now we're going to go to the timer and the controller, and we're going to go through and cycle through each zone. And now don't do it quickly. You need to open up, say, zone one and wait. Give it time to allow the pressure on the main line to go through that valve, and any water that's in the system to drain either out of that manual drain that you have here or out the top of this lowest head by removing that cap. And it may take a few minutes. There's a lot of water in there. So what you want to do is you're going to want to cycle zone one, walk over to zone one where you have it marked out with your flags and you've got your nice map that you've mapped everything out on. And you want to go observe and see if water is flowing out. You could possibly even take a shop vac and a wet dry shop vac, not a regular shop vac, and even suck some of that water out. But the thing you got to be careful of there is your system may have check valves in your sprinkler heads, which means you try to suck that water out, but it's not going to work because there's nowhere for it to suck air. So you would actually have to open up two sprinklers, remove the caps on two sprinklers, and then suck that out. But I'm not recommending that. Obviously there's some safety issues there if you did not have a wet dry vac, of course. And when it's usually not recommended to put a wet dry vac on an extension board. So you need to check your manufacturer recommendations on that. So I would just go with a gravity flow, open up these caps and let it drain out. That's not going to be a perfect system for draining your irrigation, but it will definitely give you some level of protection because you're getting most of that water out. But there's still going to be low points in this line. There's still be water trapped in the bottom of your heads down here. But if this is a low head, your heads that are up higher on higher ground should drain out, and so you've protected most of your system. you definitely have reduced the chances of any kind of issue. So kind of just to walk you through that quickly on the gravity flow method. So shut off your main using one of these types of valves, whatever it is you have on your irrigation main, probably this first one here. And this is called stop and waste valve. So you're going to turn this piece perpendicular. So anytime if you want to know if your valve's open or closed, if the handle is in line with the pipe, then it's open. If the handle's perpendicular, that's closed. Same here. If this handle's in line with the pipe, then it's open. Same with this one. If that T on top is in line with the pipe, that's open. So step 2, you're going to want to Step 2, you're going to want to open those manual drains at the lowest head. You may have something like this at the end of the line. If you do, that's great. You're lucky. If not, you may actually have auto drain valves at the end of the line. Now, these things drain every time the system shuts off. They're not very water efficient, so I would not recommend installing these if you don't have them. And if you do have them, you may even consider removing them, because what these do is every time the system shuts off, it drains out automatically. Oops. All right. So if you don't have manual drains, you may have to go to the lowest head and unscrew the cap like this. So this is just a sprinkler body that's in the ground, and you're going to unscrew this cap. This is a rotor, and that should allow water to start flowing out. Now, you want to be careful not to get dirt and debris in there. So before you do this, I would even you might even take a plastic bag and punch a circular hole in it, push it down around the outside of this, and then unscrew it. That way you're protecting from dirt getting in there. Oops, sorry. I'm using my mouse to scroll with here. Okay. So another thing you're going to want to do is, you don't have a manual drain or a head, actually, so let's scratch that, on your drip system. You're going to want to go to the end of your drip line, and you should have it's like 2 circles here. This is a clamp, terminus clamp. You're going to slide that clamp away. Oops. And then just open up that line and let it drain. And this is a good idea just to flush out any debris. You get stuff trapped in here, and that will clog up your drip system. So not only are we going to allow the water to flow out, but this is going to be a good way to get trash out of the line too. And the same thing, while you're out here doing all this, you may as well inspect your nozzles on your sprinklers. So on a rotor, and when you take off this top part of the body, you have a nozzle here. And there's a set screw that holds it in place. You can back that screw off a little bit if you want to adjust the stream flow, but don't go too far, because that nozzle will just fly right out of there when you have water pressure. But what you want to look for is that nozzle eroded or broken or even missing? So you can replace these nozzles. The other thing you want to look at here is inside the bottom of this spring, part here. Looking in the bottom, you'll see that screen at the bottom that captures trash. So you may have debris that's in there. So this is a good time to take a look and clean out any trash that may be in there. If you have fixed spray, they have a filter inside just below the nozzle. So if you unscrew this nozzle from the top, this nozzle right here, you unscrew that, there's a little screen underneath. You may have trash and debris on that, so that's a good time to clean that out too. All right, and then we're going to cycle through. So we've shut the water off, we've opened up the heads or the low points. Now we're going to cycle manually through. Now this is a Rainbird controller. Yours may be different. You're going to have to look at the manual on that. And you want to give each time, allow enough time to drain. And then the last thing you're going to do is to insulate any exposed components. So if you're fortunate enough, you may wrap the pipes here and put the cover on it if you have something like this. But in many cases, you don't. You just have an exposed backflow device like this. In this case, you can wrap it with a towel, dry towel, and then put a plastic bag over it. So you want it insulated and dry. All right, step 2, or method 2. This is the blowout method. Again, map out your system, flag your sprinklers. Now, compressed air can be dangerous, so this is where you might want to hire a professional if you've never done this, or if you're, feeling confident. Just some safety things you need to know about. First is always wear safety glasses, because compressed air can send projectiles. Something breaks on your system, especially if you over pressure the system. Don't exceed the pressure of the irrigation system. So I said before, most systems are like 35 to 50 psi. You can go maybe up to 75, 80 psi, but I would definitely not go any higher than that. Even though your air compressor may be able to go up to 100 or 120, you need to regulate that pressure down. So don't stand over nozzles or components. So even though it's kind of cool when the air blows out all the water out of the nozzles, don't let kids go stand or play in the sprinklers, because those nozzles may launch. So be aware of anybody around. Don't exceed the pressure limits of the system. Be cautious of electrical hazards. Always use a ground fault outlet if you're going to plug in your air compressor or whatever outside. And then familiarize with your owner's manuals for any of the equipment, your devices, anything you're going to be using on this process. So let's go back to our diagram. So it's similar to the manual, the gravity flow. So we're going to start out by shutting off the system. But now we're going to go, instead of opening up heads, this is going to save you from having to open up valves or heads at the end of the system. You're going to go straight from turning off the water supply right to cycling the zones. And what that does is releases the pressure off of that main line. Now we're going to go back here. Actually, circle that. This is the shut off on the downstream side of your backflow device. You want to shut that. So close that valve, because we're going to pressurize right here. And we don't want to force air pressure backwards into that system. So you want to shut that valve off to protect it. And now we're going to connect to that. If you have an airport here, play on words there, airport. If you have a port, maybe a threaded port on the side of this pipe, you can attach, using different fittings, your air supply here. Just be sure don't exceed the pressure of the system. And that's going to blow air into this main line. Now you want to go back to your clock and operate those zones, cycle through the zones. So as you do that, so let's say we pressurize here, we've protected our backflow device. Now we're going to open up this valve, and that's going to blow air through that system. And we've got you may want to open up the end of this. That's one thing you want to do. Open up the end of your drip line. And also remember, what's the maximum pressure for a drip line? 25 psi. So you're going to want to back your pressure way off before you pressurize this with air to blow that out. Now we can increase the pressure and take care of these other two zones. And the same thing, you're going to cycle through. All right. And the very last thing, this should be a 6 here, is to, this is a new presentation. I haven't even had time to send it to Hallie to look through it, and point out all my errors. But so this should be step 6, and that's going to be insulate. All right. So shut off the main line, cycle through the zones to let off the pressure, isolate your backflow by shutting off this manual valve here. Now, if your system has a blowout connection, it would be right here. This one does not have a blowout connection. So who are we going to hire to put in a blowout port if this is the method we want to use? That would be our licensed. Sorry, it's really hard to write with a mouse. Licensed plumber. Fancy person. All right, so that's where that would go. Make sure you shut that off, pressurize the system, then you're going to open up each zone using the timer. So this is actually, I didn't realize I had this photo. So this is what a blowout port looks like. So you see how they have this shut off to protect the backflow device. So the direction of the water flow is this way. So we're going to pressurize here with a connection port. They're going to manually cycle through each zone to allow that air to blow out the water. And when that turns from water to mist, then you're okay. That's air with just a small amount of water, so you're good. And then you want to insulate any of your components above ground. So again, don't exceed your system pressure, and it does take a good bit of cubic feet per minute of airflow to do that. So if you have one of those little pancake air compressors, it may not be powerful enough. So insulate your components. And do we have time for a quiz, or should I just start? I think we're getting close on time here. I guess we've got 8 minutes until 1. Do we need to wrap it up here?
Yeah, if you could wrap it up, Greg, that'd be great.
All right, that sounds good. Well, you all got off the hook today. You don't have to do the quiz. So I was going to ask you which valve to turn off in the system. That, of course, is valve B. Who should work on this part of the system? That should be your licensed plumber. And do we have any questions? If we have time for questions. If not, you can contact me or Hallie, and we'll be glad to help you out. Any questions there in the chat box? Let's see.
I don't see the chat box right now, but I have a question because I'm not familiar with irrigation and winterizing it. So let's say I have irrigation out front. If I wanted to hire someone to winterize it for me, is there an average cost for something like that if it's a one-time deal?
That is a great question. I have never actually hired anyone to winterize the system. I typically just do that gravity drain, which gets most of the water out. Now, occasionally I'll still get maybe some damage to the head. But a head can be replaced for $10 or $15, and I don't have an air port, a blowout port in my system. So I don't know what the cost would be. And I don't even want to guess what that might be. So contact an irrigation professional on that one. Good question, Hallie.
And one more for you. So when we're talking about winterizing, is there a specific point in time when you should do it? I know you want to do it before it hits freezing, but do you just play it by ear every year, as to when you actually need to go out there and shut things off?
You could get started on this as early as, I would say, October. And but if you haven't done it yet, it's no panic. We don't usually get into our really cold weather in Georgia until January and February. So there's still time. And the reason I say you can go ahead and shut it off in October is you really don't need irrigation after October, unless we just have an extremely dry situation. But with the cooler weather and we get winter rains and in those days where it's just drizzly and the ground tends to be moist, you rarely need irrigation at that time.
All right. Well, I don't see any more questions in the chat box right now. But I will say, Shonda did put a feedback form in there. So there's a link. If you guys don't mind clicking on that link, filling it out, let us know what you liked today, what you didn't like. That would really help us out, for planning for future programs. So with that all said, I think we're good, Greg. So thank you so much for presenting today. I really appreciate it. And I know the folks on here do.
Well, thank you, Hallie. And I enjoyed it, and I hope you learned something you can use. And just Happy New Year, everyone. Last 2 weeks of the year closing in here. So exciting to end 2020. I hope next year a whole different picture. So enjoy time with your families.
All right. Well, great. Thanks, Greg. And Joy, where's the feedback link? Shonda put that in the chat box. So it's feedback form. It should be right above your message. Got it? Cool. Thank you. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Greg.
Thank y'all all for joining us, and thank you so much, Greg and Hallie.
Anytime. All right. Well, have a good holidays.